What is up everyone guys, this is Deciphered and this is our third video from the channel Bibliomaniac Cinephile, and this is the second video that I am featuring in personally, and this has to be an absolute pleasure for me because I love doing this. And now that I've done the very first video and I got the response from you guys, I've got to say this, I'm really overwhelmed in a good way that you guys showered with me with such good messages and constructive criticism, and I really loved it. And before I go on with this video, I just want to mention my partner in crime Mitesh Chalapa, who literally slogs day and night to get the final product done. So please, a huge shout out to him. And I'm pretty sure you guys must have checked the second and third video, which was obviously divided into two parts, which was shot by him, and I'm pretty sure you must have loved it. And right, today we're gonna be talking about the movie Dunkirk. And Dunkirk by far is one of the best war movies to have ever been made in the history of cinema. And I'm not saying this. It is IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, and the big critiques all over the world are the ones who have said this. I know that my very first video was about a Christopher Nolan movie, and I'll try to be a bit more versatile, but Christopher Nolan is the man when it comes to making movies, making films, and being passionate about something that you do. I think Christopher Nolan is the man, and he's by far one of the most favorite directors that I have had, and not just me. A lot of other cinephiles out there, a lot of other moviegoers, a lot of other movie fanatics who are out there in the world are huge fans of Christopher Nolan's work, right? So before I jump on to any details of Dunkirk, I just want to give this huge disclaimer out that I usually give out every other time when I talk about a particular movie or a book. That would be that there's gonna be spoilers, or maybe not, but I might spill out a bit of tea from the cup, and I really don't want you guys to be disappointed after you watch the movie, because this video is going to stay on YouTube. So I really appreciate if you guys might still want to watch the video if you haven't watched the movie, or if you have watched the movie, then this video is exactly for you. Right, let's jump into it. Dunkirk was probably the very first Christopher Nolan movie that was shot on an IMAX camera. Now, I have mentioned this in my last video, and I put a lot of emphasis on IMAX camera. The reason being that it gives a huge perspective for you when you're watching a movie. And a lot of people were kind of disappointed with the movie. The reason being that there was no backdrop to a particular character's storyline. But we're gonna go to that later on. But talking about being shot on an IMAX camera and not witnessing the movie's greatness in a theater is such travesty, because a lot of work goes into shooting a movie, and when you watch it on a much smaller medium or a device, then you really don't get the essence of it. But the movie got me from the very beginning, and a huge amount of credit goes to Hans Zimmer for that. The reason being that Hans Zimmer has produced a soundtrack, like an original soundtrack, especially for this movie, that keeps you on the edge of your seat, and you can slip and trip down anytime. And this is not a bit of exaggeration, guys. No, this is not a bit of exaggeration at all. The reason being that from the very beginning, there's a ticking sound, there's a clock ticking sound that goes on throughout the movie, right? And there is action from the very first go, from the very first scene, from the very first cut. There is no build up to anything. We are right in the war. Dunkirk, giving a historical backdrop to it, I would just want to say that Dunkirk is basically a town in France which was war stricken back in the year 1940, when the German Nazi soldiers had conquered most of the France, and it was just Dunkirk and a couple of other beaches which was left out. And the French and the British soldiers, which were the Allied forces, they had built a mole. A mole is basically a protective bridge, a fortified beach, you could say. In this, I mean, mole is not that, but I'm just to make it simpler, it was a fortified beach which protected themselves from the Nazi Germany's, who happened to be the antagonist in the movie, right? And there were around 45,000 soldiers stuck in that particular strip coastline, and the the government of Great Britain did not have the resources or the money to bring them back to their homeland. So they sent in all of these private boats, fishermen, and all of those people who lived in the coastline, so that they could fetch these soldiers back and rescue them and get them back before the Germans get to them. So this is a heroic victory in a sense. I mean, yes, there was huge colossal damage that happened to the British army and to the French army, which was in refuge after that, from that point onwards. But it is considered as one of the best evacuation stories in the whole war, because it was so heroic, and the British solely saved their soldiers with the minimum resources and time that they had, right? So, talking about time, we just know that Christopher Nolan loves to play with time, space, or whatever dimension that he sees, right? He's not a sci-fi director in general, but he's someone who's very pragmatic and tries to play with all of the props that he has around. So there are three dimensions or three scenarios or three main aspects to the movie. The one being the mole, which is the beach, the fortified beach of Dunkirk. The second being the sea, where a bunch or maybe thousands of ships and boats have sailed across the English Channel to save the French and the British soldiers majorly. And third being the air, where the Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force, and the Royal Air Force, which is the British Air Force, are pitting against each other and trying to nullify the whole threat effect created by the German Nazis, right? So we're gonna start off by talking about the mole. The movie starts with a buzz. The movie starts off with the camera panning in downwards to the ground, showing that there are posters flying all over. The posters are being showered all over the soldiers who have been stranded right there in Dunkirk, in the town of Dunkirk. These are the British and French soldiers, and these posters are being thrown by the German Luftwaffe, and they're blowing out sirens just to cause a threat effect, right? And the main character from this whole scenario or the dimension of mole, the very first dimension that we've chosen to discuss, his name is Tommy. Now Tommy just happens to catch one of those posters. He grabs one of those posters and he looks at it, and it says, "You have been surrounded." And it is basically the map of Dunkirk, which shows that there's a whole red patch, which means the Nazis have conquered the whole mainland of Dunkirk, and it's just the beach strip which has been left out, where the 45,000 soldiers are trying to thrive the last few days that are left for them to save themselves, right? Now, as he's looking at that poster, there are a few bunch of soldiers right next to him who get shot, and he realizes that the Germans have arrived. So this is the time his tail is on fire, and he has to run for his life. He runs as much as he can, and this is one of the best scenes that have been shot, because the camera, for not even for a second, flutters even a bit. The camera is right on him, and it has a little bit of shaky effect just to show how realistic the war is. And he somehow tries to save himself, and he ends up encountering a bunch of soldiers who happen to be French and British, who are fortifying the beach. Now he somehow tries to traverse through that fortification and goes inside the beach, and they identify him as a Britisher, and he gets saved. Now this whole 5 to 10 minute sequence of him running and the German soldiers chasing him and the other British soldiers is really intense, because Tommy has a lot of friends and colleagues around, and he could literally see them get killed, and he's not even getting a second to realize or fathom what has happened to him. And all he can do is just save himself and run for his life. That is all he could do. And that shows that war really is not something that needs to be needs to be glorified in literature or any of that sort, but can also be told in a way that is very realistic and yet be heroic in a way. Because Tommy didn't do anything wrong, because he just saved himself so that there is at least a soldier alive in the British army who could be useful for tomorrow, right? This was the whole metaphor that Christopher Nolan wanted to propagate. Now this is the story of Mole. Now throughout his time at the mole or in the beach, Dunkirk beach, he finds a guy named Alex. Now Alex is played by none other than Harry Styles, who was a huge pop star and who was a former member of One Direction, if you knew. I was really not sure when Christopher Nolan casted Harry Styles, because he really hasn't acted much. But after seeing Harry Styles' performance in the movie, I realized that I can never doubt this man's casting decisions, because he was magnificent. And this is a 100% truth that's coming out of my mouth, and trust me, Harry Styles was amazing. Now Harry Styles is Alex, who really doesn't give a damn about anyone else, but he just wants to save himself because he's petrified of the whole situation. On the other hand, Tommy has a bit of humanity in him. He tries to help other people. Now in this process, Tommy and Alex kind of befriend themselves, and they make a pair, and they pretty much stay together every night. Now obviously I'm not going to go into the details of what happens exactly throughout, because that would be a huge spoiler alert, and I'd be just decrypting or deciphering the whole script or plot, and I really don't want to do it. So like I said, this is pretty much that happens in the mole, and at the end they get saved, right? And there are a lot of complications that come with it.